Now, both of you have worked with Marvel Comics before, but the Civil War series, it's a pretty big deal. Chip, can you just briefly explain Alpha Flight and how they fit into the story?
Oh, comics are so complicated. Yeah, Alpha Flight is, like you said, it's kind of Canada's answer to the Avengers. And they were actually started by Pierre Trudeau in the late 70s within the comic books. And so with this story, Marvel's doing a big event, Civil War 2, and it revolves around a new superhuman who can predict disasters. And so the superheroes are kind of divided on whether or not they should use that information to imprison people before they commit the crimes. So Alpha Flight's kind of caught in the middle of this, and we had them basically consult their leader, the Prime Minister.
That's a brave thing to do. How would you describe, Ramon, your working relationship with Chip, since he's a writer who also happens to draw?
Working relationship. Well, I think because Chip has a visual, tendency to he's created his own storytelling and stuff like that. He kind of knows when he's going. Packing things down with too much dialogue or how he's spacing out a page and that sort of thing. So I think his visual leanings did help a clearer story, I think. And
what about, as he just mentioned, bringing Prime Minister Justin Trudeau into this universe?
It's interesting. I remember reading that original X-Men comic where his father, Pierre Trudeau, appeared in X-Men. He was helping Alpha Flight back then. So it's kind of actually a funny full circle just drawing him here back in Civil War II. You know what I mean? So it's kind of like I read the father's story, now I get to draw the son. So it's kind of awesome.
Is there an extra challenge when you're drawing all made up imaginary characters, and then not just a real character, but the real character happens to be the leader of our country, and you're putting those characters side by side?
I don't think there's a challenge between putting them side by side, because they're both you kind of cartoon the real person to kind of match the existing artwork. But I think just trying to capture whether it's a celebrity or a political figure, capturing their likeness and their nuances and personality through the artwork, that's probably the more difficult part, because people are familiar with that figure in reality, whereas with the fictional characters, they're not that familiar with them. You have more extremes you can play with, whereas you're more confined by the real figure.
Right, because nobody's going to say, oh, that doesn't really look like what... Yeah,
exactly.
Yeah. So, Chip, as you say, Alpha Flight, go to him for advice, go to the Prime Minister. Are you having a bit of fun with how internationally popular he is?
Yeah, when we kind of received the assignment, kind of knowing that it was in the hands of Canadians and it was a story about a Canadian super team, it seemed like the obvious choice to have our Prime Minister as a part of it, because he's such a huge figure right now on the kind of international pop culture landscape. Stories keep kind of popping up about him popping up and shirtless and
out of caves.
Yeah, exactly.
It's really tricky though, dealing with politics anywhere, let alone in comics. For all his popularity, one person's superhero is another person's villain. So how did you handle that?
The big concern was because everything's kind of done in advance. I wrote the script in March, April. I was worried that his honeymoon period would be over. He'd do something really wrong, and all of a sudden we have this comic coming out where he's essentially a hero. The day with the elbow, that was a rough day for me.
Yeah,
because
you
I was
were worried, you were holding breath.
It's all falling apart. I'm gonna get kicked out of comics. It's the worst.
Did you get pushback though from Marvel in terms of trying to not make him too partisan?
Not really. There were a few kind of notes that came in right at the end, but they were really minor. They're strangely supportive. I think partly because it's not the president.
Right. Yeah.
I think they'd probably be more concerned about that. But the Prime Minister, they're we barely know what he does. And
doesn't that make you feel so sad yet proud in some weird way to be Canadian?
It's great because it gives you leeway. If there was more of a microscope on it, then we wouldn't have been able to get away with having him throw punches at Tony Stark, for sure.
Oh my goodness, I hear you actually reached out to the Prime Minister's office. What response did you get there?
Yeah. Well, usually with stuff like this, you need to reach out for celebrity likenesses. And so I use my top media contacts to get the contact info for the communications director. And I think she was excited about it, but she also couldn't give me explicit approval because it's kind of like the government endorsing a comic book, which is a bit of a weird thing. So she was like, you know what? If you do it, we're not going to like sue you or anything. And I'm like, that is good enough for Marvel Legal, and that's good enough for me, so we can do this.
Did you tell her that he was going to be boxing with Iron Man?
Well, in my emails, I'm like, because I know he's like a comic nerd.
Right.
So I was like, you let me know what Marvel superhero you want him to interact with, and I can make that happen. I am a dreamweaver here.
Nice.
And she would not give me an answer, so my assumption was that he would enjoy kind of being in the ring with Iron Man.
I picture that that's one of those moments when the Prime Minister is like, oh, I wish I could. I wish I could just request how I want to see myself. I personally have my whole superhero thing worked out. I'm sure the listener does too, if they could be and what they would be.
Who would you want to be in?
Oh, I'd be Indigenous Wonder Woman. Are you kidding? Absolutely. Yeah. My lasso would be sweetgrass. My bracelets instead of metal would be, buckskin. It would be lovely.
The tiara.
Absolutely. Ramon, what sort of reaction are you getting from fans of the series?
I mean, the reactions have been great all over the world. I was actually surprised how global this went. Like, I was getting calls from Colombia, Spain, like Eastern Europe. It was just crazy. Like, our PM is quite the well-loved global figure. So it's actually kind of, it's been an interesting little kind of roller coaster.
I didn't get those calls.
Turn your ringer on your phone.
Oh, okay.
Now that it is out, have you heard from him now that it's out? Like, I know you were trying ahead of time, but...
No, I waited outside his door, but nothing
nothing. When it came out, he was in China.
That's right.
And my brother-in-law was actually his translator there. And so my mother-in-law was just like, "Oh my God, we got to get him the comic in China." And I'm just like, "No, this is not the time or place."
I can wait till he gets home.
Let him come home, settle in with a nice cup of cocoa, and read his comic book featuring him.
Let me now, I hate to get all serious on a couple of comic guys, but I am going to ask a serious question in terms of not just his inclusion in this comic, but his popularity in general around the world. Do you think it's about the politics, or do you think it's tied to the fact that he is a young, good-looking dude? I mean, is the world that shallow now that is what has made him so popular?
I'm going to say it's probably a bit of both. I mean, he's so diametrically opposite, or at least in presentation, from our last PM. And I think you have the Trudeau mania from way back when. A lot of us who grew up with his father, like my household was a Pierre Trudeau household, are now, older and, on social media savvy and are seeing this happen. So I don't know. I think it's a little bit of both, to be honest with you.
Do you think there's some of that nostalgia? It's the idea that he was in that house as a little boy and now here he is, the man of the house?
Yeah. There's the kind of legacy thing. We don't have Kennedys or Bushes or Clintons now, I guess, where, there's that kind of continuity, and the Trudeau family seems to be the only one in Canada that kind of has that. And it kind of ties into comic books as well, because there's kind of legacy characters as well. Like sidekicks take over for the superheroes, and it kind of keeps on going. And so it definitely lends itself.
And in the same way that this Canadian Prime Minister is getting all kinds of attention all over the world, it seems there's this huge groundswell of Canadians involved in comics lately. What is it about the talent here, you think, that makes Canadians so sought after?
I think it's
your industry?
I think it's also a bit of the shallowness, because we're all very attractive, so we get all the jobs.
You are both beautiful gentlemen, beautiful beards, gentlemen, beautiful beards.
I think Toronto especially is such a supportive community. Like, there's such a diverse array of talent and comics being produced from here, and there's not a lot of kind of snobbery between the groups. So we're able to get together and enjoy each other's company and help each other out with projects, and I think that just kind of creates more of it, and it's easier for people to kind of enter the industry via Canada for some reason.
Do you think that makes for a more creative environment when people work together collaboratively?
Oh, definitely. Like, I'm part of a studio, actually the studio that Chip started back in, 2004, was it, or 5?
2003?
Oh, 3, okay. The Raid Studios. And I joined the studio after about a decade of freelancing by myself, working outside of my own space at home. And it just excelled my career after joining the studio, because you have a creative environment where you're helping each other out, you're critiquing each other's work. If a job comes to one guy, he can't do it, he might pass it along to the other guy as well. So you have that whole supportive community, as Chip was saying, around you that really does help your career kind of explode, especially if you're working hard and talented and you're pushing yourself forward.
And exploding it is. Congratulations to both of you on this great comic.
Oh, thank you very much.
Thank you.